It's been a great year for explorative adventure games. First we had Zelda Breath of the Wild, with its marvellous vistas and deep secrets to uncover. Following the same vein of Zelda from years past, we now have Songbringer, a top-down RPG adventure set in a procedurally generated world. Some of you may read that last sentence and be concerned about the randomness such games usually garner. There's no need to worry though. Songbringer feels just as polished and handmade as any other title on the market, weirdly, probably more so. You play as Rock, a topless man who's crash landed on a planet after observing it from afar on his main ship, the Songbringer. Getting up and going into the first cave you come across, Rock discovers a sword, one that awakens demons and baddies across the land. It's here that you start to discover the simple controls Songbringer employs. You see, just like Zelda of yesteryear, Songbringer is fairly simple to control. Press A to swing your sword, B to drop a bomb, X to throw your hat, and Y to use a healing item. This simplicity at first comes across as annoying. Every enemy you meet, every obstacle in your path, and every action you take feels like you could be doing more, as if Songbringer isn't letting you properly react to the world around you. It's not until you finish the first few dungeons that you realise the genius behind the decisive and simple actions. The levels and enemy placements dictate the difficulty of the game, not your control of the character going around it. This clever distinction between complexity of level design and character movement is easily one of the reasons I enjoyed spending over 6 hours in Songbringer's world. The more dungeons I completed, the more powerful I became, allowing me to defeat enemies with ease and in turn making me feel like a master of the world. As alluded to earlier, Songbringer has plenty of items to uncover, from shields that allow Rock to take no damage when standing still, to elemental blocks that allow you to add an element of damage to your arsenal of weapons. There's plenty to find, so much so that even when I had explored 97% of the map, I still had only collected 67% of the items to be found in the world. Each time I explored a dungeon, I was excited to see what new power-up I'd gain, a fantastic feeling which helped me push on until the very end. Being a procedurally generated world, I was concerned that Songbringer wouldn't have so much of a story, a fact I'm thankfully glad to say isn't the case. Throughout the whole campaign you'll meet multiple characters, each explaining a bit more about the world that you're exploring, and the world you've come from. What makes the story feel even more handmade is the fact that at certain times you'll get acts peppered throughout your exploring, that not only push the story further along, but feel unique in the way they're delivered, as if the developer didn't have to account for the randomness procedural generation employs. I've mentioned the procedural generation a few times, but what does it actually entail? Well, the world for one changes each time you play it, meaning there will be different mazes to navigate to get you to set pieces, as well as different enemies hidden throughout. This random world means you'll encounter dungeons at different times, with myself taking on one of the hardest at the start of the game. Whilst that may sound a little daunting, it did mean that I then picked up an item which gave me double damage early on, making the rest of the game a little easier. This randomness also ties in perfectly to Songbringer's optional permadeath difficulty, which, as the name implies, ensures you lose your save should you die, meaning the game has plenty of replayability. The randomness of the world also pushes you to explore as much as possible. Secrets are hidden everywhere, from destroyable walls that have no telltale signs of being breakable, to puzzles that require specific items to solve. It all reminds me of the original Zelda, so much so that it was exciting finding a room leading to a new item, or solving a puzzle using items in ways you didn't realise you could. Songbringer's pixel graphics aren't going to be to everyone's taste, but for what it's worth, in animation they're gorgeous to behold. You can tell loving care has been given to each enemy, as well as the environment, from the amount of attention to detail on display. The pixelation can come with costs though. The writing used throughout can be a little hard to read at times, and you'll find it difficult to properly see tiny enemies on the map whilst fighting. Unfortunately, I did have a few bugs with the game in my time exploring the world. For one, I had a few instances where enemies would get stuck out of bounds of the zone, meaning I was stuck in a room with no way to kill the offending enemies. These issues required me resetting back to the main screen, annoying for sure, but not the end of the world. I certainly couldn't help but be impressed throughout my entire time in Songbringer at the soundtrack, one which perfectly encapsulates the dredging through swamps and wilderness. The music switched up perfectly, providing dungeons with heavy and metallic soundscapes, all whilst making the act of exploring a joy with its background explorative cues. In conclusion, Songbringer is certainly going to divide opinion, and could even be compared to Marmite. Its simplicity comes from a bygone era, and whilst I loved the simple controls and sometimes hard enemies, I could see why some would be put off, even feeling limited by what Songbringer offers. For a one-man band, Songbringer is certainly an impressive game, one that manages to deliver on its explorative themes, all whilst harkening back to a bygone era. It may take some cues from Zelda, but Songbringer manages to bring enough to the table to be admired as a great adventure game. Regardless of whether you play through Songbringer once or multiple times, you're sure to find something that you like in this weird and wonderful world.